Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to those who joined us for our first panel yesterday, and welcome to those of us who are joining us on this first panel of today. My name is David Ostitz. I'm the Director of the AFME Technology Operations Division, and today on the second webinar, we're discussing the hugely significant and timely EU Digital Finance Package. And joining me is a fantastic panel of policy and industry experts deeply involved in this important initiative. So please can I welcome Adrian Unab, Director of Public Policy at Credit Suisse and a long-standing member of the AFME Technology Operations Committee. Doris Dietz, Head of Digital Finance, Payment Services and Cybersecurity at the Federal Ministry of Finance in Germany. Jan Sessens, Head of the Digital Finance Unit, DG FISMA, the European Commission. And last but not least, Pablo Obiola, Head of Digital Regulation and Trends at BBVA. And I just thank all of the panelists for joining us today for this discussion. So for those of you listening in, thank you. So for the people dialing in today, the real aim is to get a good understanding of the EU Digital Finance Package. And based on your current understanding or capacity joining us today, we need to consider what it may mean for you, your firms, and Europe as a whole as we start to embrace technology in all aspects of financial services, and now specific areas of regulation are starting to be embedded. I want to get to the speakers as quick as I can, but just two first points for myself. One, just around the digital finance package itself, and then secondly, how you can interact with us today and the speakers. So in terms of digital finance package, just some very quick level setting. It was published back in September this year, where the Commission's adopted the digital finance package. It's been based on a broad consultation and industry engagement period really over the last 4+ years. And it comprises a range of legislative and non-legislative measures, so covering the digital finance strategy, legislative proposals on crypto assets, known as MiCA, a Digital Operational Resilience Act, known as DORA, and a strategy for retail payments. We will not be able to get through all of the content today, but we will dive into some of the specific areas. Just draw people's attention to the fact we have a panel dedicated to crypto assets on Thursday, where MiCA will be discussed, so we'll park that here. And the same for the retail payment strategy, which is not planned to be covered. And then secondly, I just want to encourage all of you who listen in to interact with us today. So please start in now, right through the discussion. Use Slido, which you'll see in the top right-hand corner, to pose your questions. And we will leave plenty of time at the end for some interactive Q&A with the speakers. So let's dive straight in. And Jan, if I can come to you, please, to kick us all off. I just really want to ask you, why the digital finance package and why now?
Yeah, thanks very much, David, and to AFME for setting up this panel today. Why digital finance and why now? Now, I think it's probably clear and obvious to everybody that the digital transformation is one of the defining, let's say, trends. I think you can see across the board, actually, in all areas of the economy. And that is certainly true, particularly in finance, as you can arguably say that finance is all about information, all about data. So that is probably the perfect area for the information and communication technologies to accelerate quite a lot. Now, we have seen, I think, with the COVID-19 lockdown and with the various phases we are living through this, all of us in different phases in the moment. I'm here in my home office, as you may see, but we do see that actually digital finance is something which has been accelerating quite a bit. Not only our generation, but also our parents and grandparents are actually using this today, and we've seen that this has really become an essential element of our lives. We think that is an opportunity because digitalization will only work if there's acceptance to it. I think that acceptance has greatly increased over the past months because we've seen how much this can help. And so I think from our perspective, Europe, we need to leverage on this actually to actually accelerate and drive this digital transformation forward as good as we can. And from our perspective, from the European Commission's perspective, this is clearly a European topic. This is not something which each and all of our member states can do on their own. Many member states are too small. Probably all member states are too small actually for new developments to be developed profitably, to be leveraged up. So we need to look at this. The single market is our best card and our best chance in Europe actually to drive this and also lead this digital development. And so in that sense, one of the objectives of the digital finance package is indeed to make sure that everybody can make full use of this single market. As much as in the broader context, we are basically coming up with legislation clarifying the legal framework of the single market for artificial intelligence, for digital service and other matters. We do, however, think, and that's the second point why the digital finance package is important, that finance is special in many regards. It is a very closely regulated sector where very often innovation can only come up to a certain stage, but you can really only mainstream it and develop it to its fullest potential if you actually have the regulatory support and the framework in place. And that is why supplementing the broader digital agenda of the Commission, making Europe fit for the digital age, we do think that additional and specific actions are necessary for the financial sector. And that's indeed, as you mentioned, the thrust of our proposals, of our package. We try to lay out some concrete proposals for today: crypto assets, operational resilience, and also the path and the projects we see for the next 4 years, so for the term of this Commission and this European Parliament. And we've looked at all the key issues there, and hope that together with the industry, with the regulators, for the next 4 or 5 years, we can really make a very good progress here and build really the framework which enables then our industry to really fully drive this digital transformation and also to lead on this actually at the global stage.
Yeah, thank you, Jan. That's it's just great insights into the overall rationale and, for the package as well. And Doris, welcome. If I can come to you, with the German presidency of the Commission at the moment as well, of Europe, and your views in the BMF. I'd just like to compliment what Jan said. I mean, what are your views on the package that's been put forward?
Doris, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Perfect.
Is it still? It should be unmuted now. Can you hear me?
It's perfect.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Good.
Well, then I just start again. Let me start at the beginning. Yes, also thank you from my side, David, for setting up this interesting panel and for giving me the opportunity to present the German presidency view on the digital finance package. And I can agree on most Jan already said, and therefore I would like just to briefly mention 3 points. Well, first of all, from our view, this package sends a strong signal towards a digital European financial union, with all the measures it includes, and Jan highlighted most of them already. And that brings me to the second point. It is also quite ambitious. We think the package, I mean, you look at it, you have 2 legislative proposals, the one for crypto, the one for cyber. You have 2 strategies, the one for retail payment, the one for digital finance. If you look at the digital or retail payment strategy alone, you see, I think, I counted it once, over 30 key actions from the Commission there, within a very ambitious time frame, which they would like to take into action within the next months and years. So we think it's a quite ambitious package. And the third point, it's a very important signal for Europe, but also internationally, we think. I mean, as Jan already said, and I totally agree on that, if we look on an international level, which are the key players, they normally come from the key players with regard to digital financial services. They mainly come from big countries. So there is, in our view, a relation between size of a country and the potential of enterprises in the digital field to grow. And therefore, and that brings me back what Jan mentioned, is I think it's a European matter, because we need a European market. Digitalization is always about scale, in a way. And why we think, and the third point, that it is an important sign for the European market at this time. With regard to our presidency, I think we already showed that we do our best to support this package. I mean, we ambitiously are bringing the 2 legislative proposals forward. We have an ambitious time frame here with regard to crypto proposal and the cyber proposal, but also with regard to the package as a whole. We had the whole topic of digital platforms on our informal ECOFIN in September. And we had the whole package and an exchange of views with member states on the October ECOFIN, with a focus on retail payments. And I think all this together highlights that we, as a presidency, see this as a very important package and one of the priorities we are currently bringing forward.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you, Doris. The point you're making here, and I think you both, yourself and Jan, have mentioned it around the EU global context. I think if we get some time, just come back to that. First, let's go to Pablo. Pablo, what's been the reception from the industry around the package?
Thank you, David, for organizing this discussion. So I think the package has been very well received by the industry because it is ambitious and it is comprehensive, as Doris was also explaining right now. I think it identifies the right priorities to further the digitization of the financial sector, which is even more important now after COVID-19, as they're all witnessing. And I would like to highlight 3 areas where the Commission is proposing action and which I think are especially important for the financial sector and for banks. One is enhancing the single market, for which digital identities play a key role. And I think that's something that the Commission and the Digital Finance Strategy recognizes. Second, I think it's also very important to promote a data-driven financial sector. And for that to be a reality, we need to facilitate access to data, but we also need to facilitate the development and the deployment of AI applications. And for that, more regulatory guidance and supervisory guidance on how to comply with the regulatory framework is also very important and will be welcomed. And the third point is ensuring a level playing field for all providers in a competitive landscape which is rapidly moving. And that's why the level playing field issue is so important. And on this point, I think we are pleased to see that the Commission recognizes the principle of same activity, same risk, same regulation, and that the Commission is considering action on adapting the prudential and the conduct regulatory framework. And on this specific point on how to adapt the regulatory and the supervisory framework, I think we should not only ensure that the new providers and the new services are adequately regulated and supervised, as for instance, MiCA will do for crypto assets by filling a gap in the existing regulatory framework. But I think this adaptation of the regulatory framework, it should also consider how to mitigate the unnecessary regulatory burden that is currently faced by banks. And this is due to the consolidated application of prudential regulation, which means banking groups apply bank-grade controls to most subsidiaries, including those that are not related to deposit-taking activities or to financial intermediation per se. And this obviously increases the time and the cost to innovate, and it puts banks at a disadvantage versus other players, non-bank players that are only subject to regulations which are specific to the activities in which they engage. So we would like the Commission to also consider this aspect when exploring how to adapt the prudential regulatory framework to materialize, to implement the level playing field. And finally, I just wanted to highlight another dimension of the level playing field, because the level playing field goes beyond traditional financial regulation. And I think that's something that the Commission is also recognizing in the digital finance strategy. In the digital economy, new technical infrastructures, app stores, mobile operating systems, contactless technology, they are needed for the provision of payments and financial services. And all financial institutions, all providers rely on those infrastructures to be able to reach users and provide financial services. So it's very important that all providers have access under fair conditions to those technical elements, to those technical infrastructures. And we welcome that the Commission seems committed to take action on this front, which is very positive, either through horizontal interventions or through sectoral interventions. But I think it's very positive, the commitment to the principle of level playing field and considering the different dimensions of this principle. So a very welcomed digital finance package.
Yeah, thank you, Pablo. Yeah, I completely agree around that level playing field aspect, which is really important. Adriana, just following on from Pablo, I mean, I'm really keen to hear from you. Is it enough? Is the package enough to support European capital markets to really transform through technology?
Thanks, David, and thanks everybody for participating in this. And Pablo, I have to agree with all the comments that you made, and I would have brought all of them up. So fantastic, well said. Yeah, I think that as we were saying before, it's incredibly ambitious, and I think that we've covered so much of what the industry has been speaking with the Commission, and we've been looking at, in order to improve the Capital Markets Union. I think everybody knows that this all started with the action plan years ago in order to improve the capital markets in the EU, to bring more technology to the small players, to the SMEs, and to help develop the market. So we needed a decent innovation, and I think a lot of it started with the retail side. As we said, that was also always a must-have, and then we looked at sort of on the compliance side, and now it's the capital markets, which must have it in order to compete with the rest of the world, in order to make us unified. So I think, yes, I think it is incredibly ambitious, but there's a lot of, like Pablo said, things that we had talked about that are incredibly important as a base for everything else to develop. And the digital ID is something that I think without that, we can't move forward. We can't move forward with cybersecurity issues. We can't move forward with AML. We can't move forward with crypto. I think that's the baseline for everything. And the fact that the Commission has understood that and viewed it and has now pushed this forward, it's something that's been in discussion for a while. But the one thing I have to say that I'm so delighted with is that over the years, looking at the development of ROFIEG, so what legislation do we currently have that gets in the way of impeding the development of innovation and digital finance in Europe? And working with the industry together, but with the ESAs and with the NCAs, what do we do? How do we move forward? Let's really do a stock take across the board. What do we need to do better, and what are the most important topics? So not just what do we as legislators and the Commission think is important, but what does the industry think? What do the policymakers think? What do the lawyers think? What do the SMEs think? And I think that is what we see in the digital finance strategy. It's covered the most important topics. And like I said, the most important, I think, as a baseline is the digital identity, which is incredibly important. And then also looking at data. So how do we use data? Obviously, ensuring that the data is protected and that we comply with GDPR, which may need obviously some tweaking at some point in order to develop innovation. But what do we do with that? And I guess the next where we go with this data spaces that we're looking under the Data Governance Act, is to ensure that we do not start looking inwardly. And I think the Commission has been very good at saying, we need to do what's best for Europe, and we need to help the smaller member states, and we need to work together with the industry and with the member states, but we also do not want to shut ourselves out from the rest of the world. So, looking at data localization or removing the free flow of data is not something that we want to do. So I know that that's being looked at very carefully now to ensure that the data is not going to third country authorities if it's not authorized, but to allow business to develop in the EU.
Yeah.
I think, yes, to answer your question, David, I think that enough is being done now. I think we need to move forward with open data, but I know that that's probably the next step. But for now, I think it's a very, very good start. And I think the fact that we're working together with industry helps.
Yeah, thank you, Adriana. I want to dive into some specific aspects of the package, but if I can, and Jan, Doris, maybe just come back on this, the sovereignty side. I think we recognise there's a trade-off between opening up financial services to third-party providers and different services and having that global context to be able to compete and some of the things that are out there, versus building that EU market and protecting and promoting the values of the EU in some of these aspects. And just briefly, maybe Jan, do you see that in terms of the package, and potentially there is that trade-off between opening up and doing more, and then equally trying to build the European angle?
I mean, honestly, I don't see a contradiction. Of course, as always, let's say, I mean, extreme. I mean, if you get to extreme situations, then let's say it starts to get problematic, and people start asking questions, basically. Yeah. So I think it's always important that we have. I mean, for me, the basis is you can only have strong European operators if you have a very good and strong, let's say, but also competitive, let's say, regulatory system. So that's the starting point. I mean, then it's not a matter of openness or not. It's just a matter of do you have actually operators or not. So that's, I think, honestly, for me, the main concern. I think if in some areas, basically, we are getting, and of course, let's say, for example, payments is a particular one which has clearly also a strategic relevance. We are, of course, looking quite closely what the developments in the markets are. And we are looking with a kind of very favorable eye also at, let's say, particularly at European projects which are kind of developing this area precisely because of its particular relevance. But I think, again, that is something which is in a way honest, is in a way natural, and probably all jurisdictions would do that. So overall, I personally do not see any kind of trade-off here. We have also been quite clear that we are not into the business of data localization. The data needs to be processed according to the rules, and the supervisors need to have access. And that is, of course, naturally sometimes easier if stuff is done, let's say, here. But we are always trying in our package to provide mechanisms where also large cross-border banks, which may actually want to organize their data on a cross-jurisdictional basis, that they can also interact with the supervisors, they can also live. So we are clearly, I think in DORA we said even explicitly in a recital, none of our measures can and should be seen as any kind of data localization requirements, because we do not think that this is the smartest way forward.
Okay. No, thank you, Jan. I've been keen now just to move into some of the specifics on there, and Jan, you just touched on it there around the Digital Operation Resilience Act, DORA, which obviously is a significant piece of proposed legislation with a lot of focus on it at the moment, certainly from our members, but in industry. Jan, if you don't mind, can I just come back to you just briefly? Can you just tell us, what's the essence of the DORA proposal in your opinion?
Yeah, I think that is a key part of the proposal, because it is very clear if the new risks which come with the digital finance, if they are not kept under check, and if citizens or small businesses have the impression that basically using digital finance is not safe, then I doubt that we will get really a kind of sustainable transition into this area, and that we will really have the uptake and also leverage all the potential we need. So in that sense, cyber risk is, of course, the key, let's say, prime example of the new risks which are being created very clearly also by digital finance. And it is, in that sense, from our perspective, very important that everybody can be sure that in Europe, across Europe, all entities, all participants of the financial system actually have a baseline of, let's say, defenses ready to deal with those risks, and in that sense are safe. And that is all the more important in our view, as also in the new digital ecosystem, actually we're going to see more and more of collaborative business models, where actually it's not just going to be the one bank which will handle all the data and all the business from A to Z, but they will operate with many different, let's say, either other financial institutions or ICT providers. And that's why it's all the more important, not only that indeed all the financial services providers in this area, they respect a certain common set of requirements, but also that we do have, let's say, requirements when it comes to third-party IFCT providers. And I think that's the second key element of our package, indeed, let's say, a new oversight, let's say, regime for critical ICT third-party providers, so that we have a situation where also there, in terms of ICT operational risks, things are unchecked, supervisors have the comfort they need, and in that sense, our firms can actually also embrace all the opportunities of these more collaborative business relationships, whether it's with cloud service providers or with many others. So that's the undertaking upshot, and I think concrete proposals we've made are indeed a common set of requirements for ICT risk reporting, testing, as well indeed as the oversight mechanism for third-party providers, which I think is also again quite similar to some of the kind of approaches which we are seeing in other large jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Jan. So I'll come to Pablo and then Adriana, please. I want to get some industry views on DORA, and then I'll come to you, Doris, to provide your remarks, but maybe reflect on some of the comments from Pablo and Adriana. So, Pablo, ICT risk management and then the oversight framework of critical third-party providers, two main building blocks within DORA. What's the industry's main views and concerns around what's been put forward?
So I think the objectives of DORA are very much welcomed, and they respond to previous claims from the industry, such as streamlining the reporting of ICT-related incidents, which is currently involves a lot of administrative burden, or facilitating the sharing of information between financial institutions on cyber threats and cyber intelligence, which is essential to be able to effectively prevent and combat cybercrime, and also further harmonizing the requirements on ICT risk management and third-party risk management, which still vary between countries and between providers within the European Union. So data harmonization and streamlining of procedures is very much welcome. And precisely because the objectives are so important, and because there is a need to have more harmonization and procedures which are more streamlined, I think it is very important to clarify how DORA will interact with the existing EBA guidelines on outsourcing, on ICT risk, in order to make sure that there are no new requirements which are overlapping or which are inconsistent with the existing guidelines which the financial institutions are already following. So I think that's an important point from the industry. And also with the streamlining objective in mind, I think the new direct oversight framework for critical third-party providers, it should help to simplify outsourcing procedures for financial institutions. For example, in relation to audits or inspections, I think the direct oversight framework could play a role there. So as we move in the direction of more direct control of the critical third-party providers, I think it's important that we allow it should allow alleviating some of the burden that is currently faced directly by financial institutions. So I think that should be the direction in which we move forward. And a final issue of concern with DORA is proportionality. And we would like to have more explicit references and clarification of how to apply the proportionality principle in regard to third-party risk management. If we look at the EPA guidelines on outsourcing, they differentiate between the outsourcing of essential and non-essential functions, and we would like to have something similar in DORA, and also to recognize the different nature of intra-group outsourcing, particularly when the outsourcing is to companies with subsidiaries which are already part of the consolidated perimeter of financial institutions, and therefore are already under the scope of financial supervision. So we would like to have the principle of proportionality, which is there, being more explicit along DORA requirements. So I think those are the main points of concern that we have on DORA.
Excellent, thank you, Pablo. Before I come to Doris to get your views and from the BMF and obviously from the German presidency, Adriana, just commenting, Pablo. I mean, for you, the implications of DORA as it stands, what would you add?
So yeah, I mean, I agree with Pablo's points again, but I guess the devil is in the detail. So a lot of what we've seen is something that the industry has wanted, and we over the past few years we spoke with the EBA and with the Commission regarding the oversight of third-party providers and basically the CSPs. It's not something that really, as an industry, we could be held responsible for doing, and as an oversight with the ESAs, that's fantastic. We welcome that. But I guess the details are, the definition of what is critical, what's a critical infrastructure, and is that different for the different parties? And then the same thing, we understand the requirement for a legal entity to be based in Europe in order for there to be oversight. But as long as that legal entity doesn't have any other responsibilities and data doesn't need to be kept there, and then this issue obviously of intergroup transactions, what happens there? So a lot of the concern will be on the detail and how this is worked out, which I presume will then be something that we will be discussing with the EBA. We had, and one thing I just want to back up to say has been so impressive and fantastic is the DFS and all of this work is incredibly detailed. There's a lot covered, and as Doris said, there's 30 different. I think she said 30 different proposals, and and that doesn't include the two legislative packages. But the Commission has held these weekly sessions, roundtables with, given COVID, it actually works out better than I think before COVID, that we were able to participate as an industry with also, we wouldn't have had that access before, which is fabulous. I have to say, it's the upside. And we just had one the other day on DORA, and it was incredibly interesting because there was so much detail. So things that I think we really need to think about. The cables, the hard, your hard drives, all of that will be covered under DORA. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be thought about in the industry. How do we deal with this? How do we manage it? What does this fall under? Are there, as Pablo said, are there additional requirements now to the EBA existing guidelines? And then, obviously there's the outsourcing. So there was the EBA, and then there's the European Commission, then we had the BCBS IOSCO, and now, funnily enough, the FSB comes out with something after the Commission, which I think is amazing, because it usually, I think used to be the other way around, but obviously following suit. So we need to ensure that we, as an industry, we want to stay safe. We want to streamline the reporting. We want to make sure that that what we're doing, that our customers' data is protected, that our systems are protected from cyber, from ICT. But it needs to be reasonable. So we really need to break this all down and ensure that it is manageable across the different. So if we're complying with one, that the additional requirements under another would not be too onerous. But I think that the package in general is something that we're very interested in. But like I said, it's the detail of it, just to make sure that with language and without not knowing that things don't fall in scope that weren't intended. Because I think that everyone understands we definitely want to stay safe, and we do not want to have any incidents, but we don't want things to fall in scope that shouldn't be there.
Yeah, thank you, Adriana. So Doris, obviously a fair few views there from Pablo and Adriana around DORA, some specifics. So think about the third country access and potential use of third-party providers, and essentially just what it may mean for financial services firms. And please, your view, the view of the German presidency on DORA as it stands and the intent, and your views on what some of those points have been raised.
Yeah, thank you, David. I mean, one of the advantages and disadvantages at the same time of being presidency is that we do not have an official view on the current proposal, which is under discussion. But having said that, maybe some general remarks to what Adriana and Pablo said. I mean, of course, we all can agree on the importance of cybersecurity, especially in times where digital services are more and more increasing. And we see in this DORA proposal a lot of things which are not really new, where the principles are already found, as already mentioned, in EBA guidelines, or already also in PSD2, which was a kind of, I wouldn't say role model, but which was the first step in the direction of ICT management and reporting obligations on European legislation in the field of payments, which is also reflected in the DORA proposal now. I mean, yes, what is definitely new are the provisions on the management of ICT third-party risks and the oversight. Even though there we have some international discussions of the FSB, the Financial Stability Board, already in this regard, which also highlighted potential risks in this area, which are now reflected in the proposal. So the interesting discussion here is, in a way, with regard to ICT risk of third-party service providers, how far these oversights are sectoral or cross-sectoral in a way. And now to coming exactly to what Pablo said, because this is a discussion we're also facing in Germany for quite a while now with our FinTech Council, is exactly what you said. What does it mean for already licensed financial institutes if they use companies or service providers which are now under supervision or oversight, so to say? Because as you said, this is the other side of the coin in a way. on one side with regard to your outsourcing obligations, and we do see the linkage there, and it's a quite interesting thing, an interesting one, which has to be discussed. I think the interesting question is here whether this has to be discussed in the legislation itself or in the supervisory practices itself then later on on a case-to-case basis, so to say. And that brings me to the second point Pablo mentioned. I think this is also a very important one about how to guarantee frictionless implementation. You mentioned the existing guidelines. You mentioned also the EZB pen testing regime, and how could we guarantee that the proposal itself, when it comes to implementation, does not cause too much friction when adopted by financial institutions and other obliged entities. I think that's a very, very important point, and this is actually one which is also part of our current discussion, the current discussions.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I think maybe just to add one, maybe just to add one thing, which is really kind of making me think is. If you look at cyber and digitalization, I mean, we all know this is increasingly development, and it's a high pace on which developments take place. And I think legislators somehow have to keep up with this pace. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges we are currently facing. And this comes true to the proposal here as well. So because I think it's not an option to really fall behind here. And I think that is something which we all have to consider, how we can just keep pace with the developments which are out there.
Yeah, no, completely agree with that. Thank you, Doris. If you think about the pace of change, crypto assets is a great example where how it's shot up the agenda as a priority. Really within the last two years or so. So I think that does really highlight it. I'm just conscious of time because, as we know, the package there's a lot in there, and we certainly can't focus on it all. And Dora could easily chew up all the remaining time.
Sorry, David. Can I just ask a question? Because I guess on Dora, on the crypto side, on the cyber side, there's ANISA, which could be very useful, and I know that as part of the package is to utilize them more. So I guess it would be interesting. I think it's a question that's often asked, but I don't know that we really understand it. Is how will they be brought into the fold more? To leverage that relationship, to lessen the burden on the rest of the European institutions.
Should I try to react to that one?
Yeah.
That would be great.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Indeed, that is a great resource and something which is also growing, I think, in their role based on the recent legislation, actually. So we have actually, what we propose is that ANISA would be indeed full part of this, let's say, oversight, committee, which is being set up. From our perspective, I think it is important here to bring together, the financial supervisors. They are, of course, the ones who ultimately are in charge of the financial institutions and their governance. So they are the ones who ultimately need to be comfortable. So in that sense, building an oversight without the financial supervisors would not achieve exactly this kind of also benefit then, which for the financial institutions, which Pablo was also referring to, and Doris. So that is maybe one of the reasons why it's good to have something which is strongly kind of grounded in financial supervisors. But when it comes to the expertise, of course, in many matters, let's say there are also others who are very competent and maybe even more competent. And ANISA is certainly here our prime kind of partner. As you know, they are they're coming up with a certification scheme for cloud services already, and have many other very good projects. So that's why they would be indeed fully part of this oversight framework.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The financial services regulators have to be, but it was just to let people know sort of where they fit in. But it is just to bring that additional, just a bit of help, because there's so much that's going forward. Sorry,
thank
Dave.
you. Can I just turn our attention to data? So certainly we've talked about it a little bit on this panel already. It's woven through the digital finance package, and we're all expecting a lot more focus and proposals around data into next year or the end of this year and into next year as well. So Doris, can I just come to you, please? So it's become much more a when we say things like open finance and data sharing, common European data spaces, and the potential review of the Payment Services Directive. What's your view, the view of the BMF around greater data sharing in financial services?
Yes, I think, I mean, it's not a secret anymore that basically data sharing is one of the most important tools when it comes to the development of AI-based tools and services. And that AI-based tools and services are currently already very important, but will be even probably more important in future. And therefore, you need, especially for SMEs, it would be very important to have somehow of data sharing in order to be competitive with players which already are in use or of data in a certain type of amount or enough data. So I think we all agree that data sharing is important to stay competitive. However, the question always is what data should be shared and how and with whom. PSD2 is one example, which is in a way kind of I would say limited, because the data which is shared is payments account data, and it's also limited shared by the institutions, because the only ones who can access this data are regulated financial payment service providers. And this is kind of, well, limited scope and scale in a way with regard to data. However, I personally think somehow it's first of all a way how to share data. Because if you look on PSD2, you have an automatically interface access to data, and I think this is the interesting part of it. The rest is a kind of already covered by data portability under GDPR, one could say. I think having said that, looking into the future, I would say the interesting questions will be how can this automatically data sharing we also maybe include some cross-sectoral data, because I think that has, with regard to innovation, a huge potential. And I think the second big question is which kind of data, how to share non-personal data, how to share personal data. I mean, with regard to personal data, of course, we need more restriction than with regard to the sharing of non-personal data. So GDPR is a very important tool here with regard to personal data, and gives us a very good guidance. And for last point, maybe I think the future could somehow also be in the field of synthetical data, which could have an additional value when it comes to where or how to get data which is usable for industrial applications of AI applications. So having said that, yeah, well, maybe to stop here and be happy to receive your views on it.
No, thank you, Doris. That's excellent. Paolo, if I could just come to you, like I say, we've talked about data. It's going to be a fundamental element of of digital transformation, and it already is. But equally, with some of the things we're expecting into next year, initial kind of thoughts or concerns around how open data sharing is being discussed for the industry. What's your thoughts?
So I think, first of all, I think we all agree on this. I think data is essential to have a data-driven financial sector, because with better access to data, financial institutions are able to improve existing products, to better tailor products to the client's need, and also to innovate with new services which are based on data. So it's definitely a key driver of the digitization of the sector, of the efficiency gains, to have a more innovative financial sector, etc. And therefore, I think it is important that we facilitate greater access to data with the control of the user, so under users' control. And I think this is something in which everyone agree, but the problem obviously is how you implement this in practice, as Doris was explaining, and it's definitely a challenge. In our the key principle here is that data value across products and services, across sectors, so you cannot regulate, or you should not regulate, access to data and data sharing with a sectoral perspective. So sector by sector, activity by activity. And this requires a horizontal, a cross-sectoral approach, because we are creating asymmetries between different types of players in different types of sectors, as PSD2 did with payments data. So in that sense, I think it is very positive that the digital finance strategy is clear on the point that the proposal on open finance will build on and will come after other horizontal initiatives, such as the Data Act or the Digital Markets Act, which we think they should develop the data portability right across sectors. And by developing the data portability right, I mean making it effective, real-time, standardized through API, so going a step beyond GDPR. Following the example of PSD2, but for other types of products and services, and for other sectors. So I think it is important, and it is very positive that the Commission recognizes the cross-sectoral approach, and it is important that interventions that are specific to the financial services sector and interventions that are cross-sectoral or horizontal, that they are consistent, that they are coordinated, sequenced, to avoid the introduction of potential asymmetries or inconsistencies. So I think, and obviously the key challenge is how the Commission will implement effective data portability beyond the financial sector. And this is a challenge because you have to standardize different types of data sets from players and activities which are very different, and you need to have some general standardization to make a framework which is allows for cross-sectoral flows of data, and we are encouraging the Commission to be ambitious on that, and we want to collaborate because I think the industry can also play a key role in helping the standardization of data across sectors.
Okay. No, thank you, Pablo. Just before we come to, I want to get some questions in and get some good closing remarks as well. So before I come to Jan with some closing remarks, Adriana, is there anything you just want to add to Pablo from the data perspective?
Yeah, just very quickly. I mean, that's something we've been talking about from the beginning, is that we really need to have industry, and it doesn't have to just be financial services, but cross-sectoral, to look at how we do this and how is data going to be monetized, and how do we build frameworks across. And I think what we're looking at is, and it is this open data platform, a little bit like on the way Australia does it. It is no longer open finance. It is open data. So at the end of the day, a consumer can look and see, they can look at their utilities, they could look at telecoms, they can look at their financial services, they can look at mortgages, everything across the board, and have a really good view of what their finances look like and what their outgoings look like. And at the end of the day, so forget about how good it is, for corporations in order to provide a better service to clients, but for the consumer, at the end of the day, the SME, to look and see what they look like 1 year, 5 years down the road based on this information. So if you look at it from that point of view, this is the ideal way to move forward for consumers, in addition to, but that has to be cross-sectoral, and that has to be open data. So that's the next step. So do we forego open finance, or do we do open finance and open tech, open utilities and open this, that, and the other, or do we just do it across the board and just do open data? But I think working with industry and setting up some sort of cross-sectoral working group, maybe the smaller ones within industry, and then a larger sort of plenary, to try and figure out what are some of the common data sets, what are some of the common denominators, and how can we set that up. And then, as Pablo says, I think it's something we need to do quickly. And I think we're far more advanced than others in our thinking on it, but we need to implement it quicker.
Yeah, thank you, Adriana. Thank you, Pablo, on that. Certainly a topic we're going to be focusing a lot more into next year as well as an industry. I want to save some time for Q&A, so if I can ask the panelists with some closing remarks to just keep it brief and we can get some questions in. Jan, so looking into your crystal ball, the package and through early negotiations, what's your thoughts on how the package is going to progress, and for you, what are some key next steps?
Well, I think we are, let's say, when it comes to the legislation, the legislative proposals, that we have a legislative process which does take a certain time, and I think Doris already had pointed before to the the challenge of indeed keeping ahead with innovative, let's say, developments. And so for this legislative part, I'm convinced that I think what both from the German presidency and also from the let's say the MEPs who are now being appointed as rapporteurs, they really want to let's say work on this quite quickly. So I hope that I mean we can. I think I'm convinced that we can make quite good progress. I have the impression from the first discussions from member states that there's a lot of general support and a lot of goodwill actually to work on those things. Of course, as some of you said, the devil is very often in the detail, and we need to get it right as well. So we need to take a bit of time to basically look at these things. But I'm quite confident on that side. However, because we know that the legislative cycle in Europe is slow, I think you've seen that our let's say our strategy also includes a number of actually non-legislative actions, which we hope we can also deliver quicker. I mean, one of them, remote identification, was already mentioned here today. Of course, we know that we need to get to fully harmonized rules, but that requires legislative change, and in that sense, it takes a bit longer. So we've asked as a first step the EBA to already develop guidelines to make already some very concrete and measurable progress on this actually in the course of next year. That's just one of the examples. I think we are now starting to set up this digital finance platform, which should also be a kind of a collaborative tool, building a bit on the webinar experience, which Adriana mentioned, quite positive one, and then trying to maybe push that also a bit further. I think that's also something where we can make quicker progress. And then overall, I think what we will do, what you will see much more, that we will actually, let's say, also look at these digital or innovation issues much more in the upcoming further reviews, but also below the legislative level. Every now and then you don't have to change the law. It's just a matter of, let's say, interpreting it, how it's being applied. And so really we want to also, as part of the strategy, we want to have a much more regular process where we really reach out to industry via this new platform which we'll establish, see what's there, and then try to see what of those things can we address quickly through interpretation or guidance or other things, so that we can actually keep the pace. So I think those are the things. Legislation is well on track, and the other things are coming possibly even before.
Yeah, thank you, Jan. Appreciate that open update on where things are and your thoughts on it as well. Doris, briefly, what would your ask of the industry be in terms of supporting the package as it stands today, but then obviously into next year as well? What would you ask the industry to do?
Yes, I think we already got quite a lot of support of the industry, which is very helpful for us. And also the webinars Adriana and Jan mentioned are contributing to that. Therefore, we felt quite well informed. However, we are totally aware that we need your expertise. We need the expertise of the industry, but also from other relevant stakeholders. Because as you can imagine, especially in the field of digitalization, civil servants are not the best ICT experts. However, we're doing our best to understand, to get things right and translate the challenges we're facing in the world into useful and helpful legislation. And well, yes, therefore, I think you can, of course, we benefit from your expertise, from your knowledge, from and from the way you design products. And in the end, I think it's on us to find a way not only to serve one interest, but also to serve a kind, how you probably said, old-fashioned common welfare by weighing and balances all these interests and expertise against each other and find a good solution which serve all of us.
Excellent, thank you, Doris. Pablo, Adriana, just please very briefly each before we go into some questions. What would your one ask be of policymakers and regulators as we get into this negotiation phase through into next year?
So I guess it's as Doris said and Jan said, it's to continue that collaboration. And Doris, just so you know, I am definitely, just because I'm in a bank, no ICT expert. As a matter of fact, I keep hoping one of my sons will be, but they're not. But we have what we do have is access to fantastic SMEs, and what we often do is bring them in then to the regulators and legislators and say, okay, can you explain how this actually works on a day-to-day basis, what we're doing? So just to continue that collaboration and that discussion, so that because and Jan said, thankfully, and I know that you guys do this, you'd like to get it done. You'd like to get it done quickly. And I know that the Germans would have loved to have, to done this within their presidency, but getting it done right is the most important thing. And we're very happy to work with you guys and also to learn from the different countries. So, for instance, the Germans, the work that you're already doing on sort of digital currencies, with some of the corporations and that kind of thing for the other member states to learn. So I guess that will be brought up another day. But the pilot regimes and all that is a fantastic plan in order for different member states to learn from each other in the legislature. So just to continue that kind of work and to bring us in, especially on the data topics, because I think it's so important for everyone moving forward. And we're happy to work with all of you.
Excellent. Thank you. Pablo, please.
Yeah, I agree. And I just wanted to reiterate also the call for coordination and consistency between sectoral and horizontal initiatives, particularly on data, on AI, on platforms access, which are cross-cutting challenges. So coordination and consistency between the initiatives is also very important.
Excellent. Thank you, Pablo. So just before we wrap up, I just take a look at the questions, and I think a good question I can put to the panel is one around prioritization, but maybe what would be the one area of the digital finance package that you think is going to bring the biggest benefit to Europe and technology change and adoption, and which thing or area would you personally really want to prioritize in that regard? Maybe Adriana?
I think from the legislative package would be MiCA, but from a non-legislative, I think the digital identity. I think that is. I mean, it's difficult because digital identity and data, but I think digital identity is a foundation for so much moving forward. I mean, forget about the 1.1 billion unbanked in the world, that are that don't have, forget not unbanked, but that don't have an identity, and sort of from a humanitarian point of view, but for us just to move forward for cybersecurity, as I said before, AML, everything else, I think digital identity. From a legislative package, I think that that MiCA, because right now there's so many different, there's frameworks, there's licenses, there's a lot of different things, and this is going to explode soon. You've got Libra, you've got stable coins, you've got central bank digital currency. There's a lot of different things going on. We need to get a unified perspective, and the hope is that that the member states won't go off and do their own different variation of the same on that, and that continue to work together on that.
Okay, excellent, thank you, Adriana. I'll just invite the panelists if they have any other thoughts around that. Otherwise, we will. I think we'll look to close.
Can I just make one comment, one just push, which I normally don't? Working for a Swiss bank in the UK, the one thing that I would ask is that we continue to look at third countries, especially that are developing some things like with, in Switzerland with crypto and with different technologies, that the EU continues to work within Europe, not just the EU.
We surely, at least that I can say from the Commission side, we surely continue to do that, and I hope that the Swiss will also continue to do that.
Absolutely.
I think on the prioritization, I mean, honestly, I take Adriana's point that the digital identities are a key area, and I think also it's really an area where what we do is important, but it's also important that the financial sector, I mean, things like what are your role in this area in the future, and how will this develop, and how can banks kind of leverage on the role they have in this area, and the trust, at least to a certain extent, they also have in the public. So I think that's really a key area. I would honestly think, however, my answer would have been, it's the single most important thing is the signal that we're sending actually with the package as a whole, that basically Europe is kind of wants to lead in this area, wants to kind of have a solid, good, but also competitive framework in place, and is a place to develop digital finance in a way. I think that's for me probably the single most, in that sense. All the measures are one by one, of course, important, but this overall signal, I think, is an important one, which I hope also will be preserved through the whole process and through the way all these measures will be then indeed implemented in Council and in the European Parliament.
Thank you, Jan. I think that's an excellent way to close today's discussion. Can I just thank the speakers for joining us today and for the insights that you've given us, hugely valuable. And thank you to everyone who's listened in as well. Please, the platform is open for networking. So if you wish to stay on, that's an opportunity. And please do join us for tomorrow, where our third webinar in the series is looking at operational resilience with a fantastic panel. And that's been led by Alison Parent, our Executive Director at our Global Financial Markets Association. So with that, can I just thank everyone again and enjoy the rest of your days.
Thank you. Thank you.